Alright, hello everybody, my name is Jay Hillix. Thanks again for joining me on this video. About the puller is definitely something that, and you could probably even just take to the machine shop too if you didn't want to purchase a dedicated tool, but I went and decided to buy one. But I actually purchased the ALTA. Um, Another good thing to have is the Mighty Vac. You can use this depending on which model you get for testing out map sensors, being able to apply a pressure to that, um, and then also applying vacuum if you're testing other things. But more importantly, it would be this U view here, airlift, and this is pretty critical when it comes to when the project is complete and you're ready to put coolant into the intercooler heat exchanger system. The intercooler pump on LT4 is the OEM one. It's pretty finicky. So if you don't do a good job of getting all the air out, it'll shut down after 3 minutes, and it'll try again. But it's extremely critical you get all the air out of that system before you to fill it up. And so at the shop, at a GM shop, they do have a special tool to do that. This UVU is kind of similar to that. It operates off the Venturi principle, where you apply and there's videos out there on YouTube you can watch that would go into those details, but basically you use shop air, and it creates a Venturi effect and pulls the system down to a vacuum. So you start to see some of the coolant hose collapse, and then you have a feeder hose that you put into your coolant. And now that you have a vacuum applied into the system, it starts to pull in the coolant. So it evacuates all the air, and then you replace that air with the coolant that you have in a bucket. So I'd recommend getting one of these tools or getting a tool that's like it. This one is pretty expensive. There's many other knockoffs that are out there cheaper. I'd recommend reading about how it works, watching some YouTube videos. It's definitely something I'd recommend getting. Okay, so we covered the base parts, kind of the two phases of the project. We're going to focus on phase one here. Went over some of the tools that you're going to need outside of just basic tools that would need to do any type of work on your car. We went over the references, some different references out there. Let's see. I think before I jump into some other stuff, let's kind of go over some of the tools I'm using outside of this for tuning. So obviously, like I mentioned earlier, I use HP tuners for tuning the vehicle. Um, my HP tuners that I have, I have the Pro version, and that provides you with a cable to interface external data sources. So this cable here that plugs into uh, the scanner. I do recommend doing that. I mainly use it right now only for the wideband, and it makes life a lot easier. There's other options out there with the AEM. Really don't care. I'm not really interested in having AEM pod on my dash to always look at my air fuel ratios. If you can set in, if you did your lay work and tuned it properly, you shouldn't have to be referencing that often. If you want that, go for it. That's up to you. It's your choice. But for me, I just need it for tuning. So when it comes to wideband, so I don't have my wideband installed permanently. I do have like I mentioned, the Speed Engineering long tube headers, and they do have an O2 bung pre-welded for you, and I just keep it plugged. So I'm tuning, then I'll put the wideband in there and tap that into this guy here to bring it into the VCM scanner and editor, the VCM scanner. So HP Tuners Pro is what I got. That's what I use for tuning. As for the wideband itself, I like PLX devices. They have a pretty nice assortment of different things when it comes to tuning. So for me, I have this AFR right here, and I bought the kit, and the kit comes with a Bosch wideband O2 sensor, comes with the actual SM AFR. It came with the multi-gauge link. It's a wireless adapter. So basically, this wireless adapter plugs into the SM AFR. The wideband then plugs into SM AFR, and then you can um, use that to put on the multi-gauge application to monitor wideband. What I do is instead of using the application to monitor that, I have this signal going into the HP2 Pro and going into the scanner, so I can monitor my AFR and or lambda or AFR errors. So that's, other options beside this, but this is what I'm using. So the other thing is, when is dynoing, right? Whether that's your typical dyno jet or a Mustang dyno, but having that to to know that the changes you're making, the mods you've done, and the tuning you've done has actually made a difference is really helpful. Fortunately, those are not available to everybody. Ideally, I would have one installed in my garage, but hey, they're expensive. And going to a shop that has one is another expense. And I wouldn't say that I'm completely uh, conservative with the funding, but would like to minimize, what I'm spending things on. And to me, with tuning, I like to see results often. I like to iterate on that often. And my local dyno shop here, they charge me $100 for dyno time, and it just kind of limits how much I can actually go down there and see the changes that I'm doing. And it's an hour away, so it's kind of a hassle. So there are some different options outside of just using your traditional dyno to see horsepower and torque. There's some apps out there like Draggy you can use to monitor changes. What I decided to do is use a device called a GTEC Pro to track my horsepower and torque. And the one I have is this GTEC Pro S. They do have the RR model. The main difference between this and RR allows you to download files from the unit itself to your computer. For like you're doing racetrack stuff, and I don't really need that. And it's a lot more money than this guy is. So I went and invested in this. It's been a really awesome investment. It's pretty darn accurate, surprisingly. Um, I won't go into the details of the whole um, battle between using just an app on our iOS or Android phone versus this. These guys do it for you. They kind of talk about the differences and why it's this guy's got a little bit better leverage when it comes to that. Biggest thing is it comes to GPS. That's part of its calculation, and the GPS engine that's in this guy is a true GPS engine, and it runs at 50 hertz. So 50 times a second, it's grabbing your location, which is pretty extremely fast compared to some of the phones out there that usually operate at 1 hertz or 5 hertz. So, but anyways, I do use this for doing my pulls, so I can see my results. You can also do quarter mile and other things, but that's actually where this picture came from. The last video I showed when I was doing my first bolt-on mods and tuning, I used that to do some dyno pulls or do some pulls to see the changes, and it was pretty spot on compared to what I was getting at the dyno at my local shop. Obviously, people are going to probably start hammering about different things that are why that would be different, but the is not to be really stuck on the numbers, but to stick with one system or like with one shop or one tool to measure these numbers and always to be comparing against that. The last thing you want to do is take it to one shop and do your dyno checks there and then go to a different shop, because especially depending on the technology they use for the dyno itself, whether it's a true load bearing dyno or another type. So the biggest thing is don't get worried about the numbers. Just establish a baseline and use the same methodology for checking against to make sure, because what you're after is you're making improvements. Obviously, we want more power, but biggest thing is you're seeing differences, and so that's the thing to keep in mind. All right, so that's some of the tools I use for for the tuning, for the wideband, and for how I track my changes. There's another app out there that I recommend that I use for checking density altitude, because obviously weather conditions changes how much the density of your air, and um, which is the big thing when it comes to because the engine is basically an air pump, and we're adding fuel to it to make power. So there are some different apps out there that allow you to to monitor DA. So DA is a good one to keep in mind whenever you're doing pulls. Ideally, if you could, you kind of are measuring your gains against times that where DA is pretty similar. Obviously, you can't control the weather, so that's going to be difficult. But if you can, or at least have that in check so that we know if you can account for some differences. Keep the video there. That was a lot to cover. Of what we're going to be doing. If there's any information you want me to put in the description or in the comments, just let me know, especially when it comes to the maybe some of the references. But thank you for joining me, and I'll see you on the next video.